Hello and welcome to Clamp, the Creating, Living, and Making podcast. I'm your host, Grant Alexander, and joining me this week is Morley Kurt.
Hello.
And Austin from the High Caliber Craftsman YouTube and Instagram channels.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, Austin. And for those who join us weekly, you'll notice that we're missing a host. Adam unfortunately couldn't make it this week, but we decided to get someone who looks exactly like him, like 100%.
Just same accent.
Just same accent, same everything. We were like, we need to get someone that comes from a similar part of the world. I'm pretty sure.
Adam, it's a nice new office you have. It's a big upgrade from your last one.
Yeah.
I was going to attempt an Australian accent right then, and I was like, no, don't do it.
Yeah. Only Morley can get away with that.
Yeah, I was like, nope, don't do it.
All right. Well, Austin, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I kind of started making when I was around 16, and I started building surfboards in my parents' garage. That was my first real jump into making things. I ended up going pro, professionally making surfboards for a living. I did that for about 16 years. After 16 years, I started making custom writing pens. So when I retired from surfboards, I rolled straight into that. So started making those. And then during that time, I decided I wanted to buy all these tools, and my excuse for buying the tools was I was like, I'm going to start a YouTube and build things using those tools that I'm going to buy, right? So I did. I started the YouTube, been doing that and the pens for, I don't know, probably like 7 years now. Not YouTube, just the pens. Been doing YouTube for probably 2 years. And that's about it. Full-time making.
Oh, it's a very fun. I think you're our first, person who's on the thing that they're full-time maker on selling things. We've had a few full-time content creators, but it's very interesting to talk to someone who can actually sell products instead of just themselves.
Yeah, well, I have an OnlyFans also, so that's technically selling myself.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's not
it's
what
mainly
we're talking.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, other than OnlyFans, what are you up to this week, Austin?
So this week I've been doing a big 3-bedroom remodel, flooring, paint, trim, all that kind of stuff. Finished that up, and then I released a video today on a metal lathe tool where you use a bearing. So if you have a part that you put into your lathe that's running eccentric, it's kind of got a wobble to it, you can use the bearing, the pressure as you feed it into the lathe, and it will true it up to make it run more true. So when you go to remove your material, it won't remove as much at the far end from the chuck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you shim up a board for a planer or something like that, where you're like I instead of taking off all this wood, I'll try and make it so that it takes off the minimal amount. And I guess for you, it's metal.
Right. Yeah, same idea. And then you can actually use it where if, say, you were using a really thin disc, almost like imagine a maximum size coin, if you put that in a chuck, it's really difficult to get it to run true. The bearing, you can actually come in directly from the side and it'll get it to run within a couple thousandths, which is, it's a really fast way to get very accurate results. So it's a tool I've had for a long time and used it all the time. But then somebody saw me using it. They're like, you should really do that for YouTube. I'm like, oh yeah, I should make another one real quick. So that's what I did this week. Posted the video today.
Yeah, I watched it earlier. What I really wanted was it made me think of trying to get my bandsaw running true. And I want it somehow to because I don't have a metal lathe, so I don't need this little tool, but it made me think of other ways I could try and think about getting to use it. And it reminded me a lot of the bearings on my bandsaw.
So do you remember the center finding tool that I made a few weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
The idea for using bearings to run, for the center finder to run on, came off of this tool. So I was looking at that tool, and that's what kind of gave me and I saw somebody using like a 2 dowel rod center finder, or like 2 dowel rods with a pencil in the middle. And I was like, man, if they use bearings, it would be like super slick and really good especially if you were dragging it over top of metal. And then I was like, well, if I do that, I can do the carbide scriber or make it where it's removable, where a pencil will go in. So that's looking at this tool that I made this week is what made me go for that tool last week with the bearings.
Yeah. Bearings are fun. That's for sure. Well, Morley, what about you? What have you been up to this week?
Yeah. Well, bearings are fun until they explode when you are doing an ollie. So, I had my skateboard all repaired. I had a nice 3 or 4 day streak going at the skate park after I replaced the bearing, after I had a little explosion. And then our provincial government decided to say, you know what the best way to stop the spread of COVID is? Not allowing people to go do outdoor recreational activities at public parks. So with that flawless bit of logic, I haven't really been able to do much skateboarding recently, which kind of stinks. But it has been productive week otherwise. I've been working on this Kerf bent chair project that I'm really excited about. It's this shape is kind of inspired from like a Japanese Shinto shrine. I don't really know how else sorry. I don't really know how else to describe that shape, but like slightly curved top, and then it's going to have pretty minimalist, slightly splayed out legs and a cross piece. So it's the first time I tried kerf bending, which is really fun. First time I've really like done any legit epoxy stuff other than 5-minute epoxy. So I braved the unseasonably cold weather today in Ontario and went out and started sanding off all the overpoured epoxy. And it's cool. It's fun. It's a really fun project.
When I saw that, I was like, he's going to regret how much he overpoured on that epoxy, because it looked like a lot of sanding is going to have to happen. Am I right?
It's like as much sanding as a good amount of sanding in other projects. There wasn't really any way around it. Because the kerfs are so thin that there's a lot of surface tension. So over time, the epoxy settles down into the kerfs as the bubbles go out. So I would go back and fill up and like kind of top up each kerf a little bit. So not having a syringe, it was just kind of the way to go. And, like I spent like, 10, 15 minutes this afternoon sanding and got most of it. So it's probably like 15 more minutes and I'll be all flush. I don't know. Having done a lot of just hand sanding in my life, the fact that I can just use a power sander, I'm like, this doesn't even work. I just hold it in the place while the machine does it and I can listen to a podcast. I'm like, it's all good.
So there's this stuff called Cavasil, and basically what it is, it's exploded sand. And they use it to thicken resins. So you can thicken epoxy, you can thicken polyester. And if you make it thick enough, it's actually, you can turn it into where it's like almost a paste, almost like Bondo. So you can actually use one of those hard yellow, bodywork squeegees, and you can squeegee it down into those holes. And it makes it so it's not running all over the place. And so next time, if you think about it, you could if you're going to do another project similar, you can always go with something like that. That's how, when we're doing like back in the day, when we were doing surfboard repairs, if you had a crack that was semi deep and you didn't want to put like tape dams and make all kinds of crazy stuff, you thicken it up, swipe it in there. And it basically, it's like, we'd make it even thicker than like drywall mud. So
gotcha. That's interesting.
Cool thing.
When you texted me that I should try Bondo, I was just immediately like, nope, because I just hate the smell so much, and I hate sanding it so much. So I was just like, didn't even consider even anything like that. I was just like, I don't want to do that at all. But that's interesting. Now that you say it, that's definitely something I'll look into for future projects. Other than that, though, I've been working on an Austin High Caliber Craftsman builds project. Austin sent me a mallet or a Maul kit, I believe, not a mallet. I know there's a difference that I'm sure Grant will correct me on if I'm not saying it correctly. And so I'm designing a stacked handle for that possibly only stacked leather, but I also may add other materials as well, because I'm going to use the laser cutter at work to cut out all the discs. So I'm modeling it in Fusion and then slicing the handle up, and then we'll import it into the laser cutter for that. So it'll be cool. I think I'm going to make a little like tutorial video on making a, like a stacked handle in Fusion and integrating that with a laser cutter. So pretty excited for that. It's like something I haven't really done before. And it's, as I said on my impromptu live on Instagram yesterday, it's really nice to be like using the materials from a craft that I don't have any experience with, like machining. Like I got these nice brass acorn nuts and the washers, and I'm like, oh, this feels so good to work with. It feels like extra nice materials when you can't really make it yourself.
Are you going to use veg tan?
Yes, I'm going to use veg tan and then some other material. I don't even know what yet.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Grant, what have you been up to this week?
Well, I also got a High Caliber Craftsman Maul in the mail. I need to do something with it. I haven't decided exactly what, but I'm not going to do leather. That's what I've decided. Even though leather is the way that this kit can be done, I'm going to try and do something different, because everyone else who's, get this Maul kit going, they're going to be doing leather handle. So I'm going to, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I'll do it like a Bear Make It Justin style, where I put a bunch of nuts in there and make a metal handle. But the other thing that I've been up to is I made some leather handle grips for my bicycle restoration project that I've been dealing with. I was contacting Ethan from Ethan Carter Designs, because as I was trying to make them, I was using my Ethan Carter Designs X-Acto knife, and it had the corset stitch on it, and I wanted to replicate that. So I was asking him some tips and tricks on how to measure circles and whatever. And I thought, it was a really, in the end, it was just like, he's like trial and error. And now that I've done enough of them, I know how to do, like, I know the right size, but otherwise he was like, just keep taking it off a little bit at a time. Obviously, the first time I tried it, I took way too much off. I was like, I'll just sneak up on this cut. And then it was like, oh, it doesn't even wrap around the handle anymore. What the hell happened? But it made me think about different ways of trying to make a business out of your making. And like Ethan is selling those not ice picks, those X-Acto knives, and wrapping leather around them. And then my wife loves that X-Acto knife. She always goes and steals it from my toolbox. I might have to order another one. Nice. But yeah, it's something that I thought would be a really good thing to chat about. And since we have someone here who's a professional maker and has been since she was a teenager, I thought it'd be a really good thing to talk about. Like, let's go from the beginning. How did you start your business? Were you just selling to your friends and you realized that you could make more of this, or what? Let's hear it.
Yeah, so at that time I was making surfboards. So it started off when I was in my parents' garage, and I was building boards in a single room, which is like the absolute worst way to build surfboards, because it's like super dusty and then you need it spotless clean for the glass, right? So it was just a nightmare. And so I started out with your closest friends that would actually buy something from you. And then it was kind of like friends of friends, and then kind of neighborhood people. And then before you knew it, so like one day this cop pulled up, and I was like, we were using polyester resin, right? Which is extremely smelly. It's not like epoxy. So like when you're glassing, when you got a gallon of resin going off of poly, everybody within like 300 yards knows that you're doing it. Oh. And I was in the middle of like suburban neighborhood, my both neighbors were like 10 feet away from my house, and so people knew that I was building surfboards in the neighborhood, right? And so it would kind of go around, and then this cop pulled up one day, and I was like, all right, this is it. We're shut down. I got reported or something, and it turns out he was there to order a board for me, but he pulled up in a squad car. And I remember my dad's face, like, uh-oh, what's going on? And the cop's like, he's not in trouble, because I was like 16.
I'm just picturing the Ghostbusters EPA agent. Do you know who I am, sir?
Right. Exactly. So anyways, then it started kind of it got to the point where I didn't know the people who were ordering the boards, and I ended up slowly, I built a shed behind the house, and then I split the rooms. So one was the dirty room and one was the glassing room. And then maybe a year later or so, I bought out a guy that owned a surfboard company, and they glass surfboards for all kinds of different manufacturers. So there's in the surfboard industry, a lot of guys just shape them, and then you take them to a glass house, and the glass house finishes them out. So I ended up buying that and then running my brand. So that was kind of the transition point. That's when I went like legit, if you want to say it that way. I mean, I was selling and making money and running a business out of the house. It was a art business. And then, cause you have to be zone industrial to build surfboards. And, so when we transitioned, I was in like the full on industrial complex, with fireproof rooms and the whole deal. And, so that transition was, I don't know, maybe over like 6 or 8 years, from beginning to like 9 guys working for me in a big 5,000 square foot facility and doing a lot of surfboards a year at that point, thousands. So the in between, and people always ask, they're like, I want to get started in my own business. How should I do it? And I'm like, every day try to pull the boat closer to the dock, right? just try to get out there, try to get your marketing going, try to get anything you can get going before you take that leap to try to get to the boat, right? Just keep bringing the boat closer so you don't have to make the big leap, right? Because most of the time when people go to business, they fail, and they fail because they didn't build up enough base before they went for it. And so the key is try to stay as small and flexible as possible in the beginning. And then, as you advance in your sales and the quantity of work that you're putting out, then you can kind of take a little bit more gambles because you have a little bit of a safety net.
So when you started out, how many hours a week were you working?
Like first started out, hardly any. I was surfing and say, Dad, I'm working on surfboards. R&D's at the beach. We got to go research and development on these boards. But so like I ended up going to college for business, and then I learned that going to college for business prepares you to work for somebody else's business, not to run your own. And so I made it 2 years, and I remember talking to my business teacher, and I was like, I don't think I should be here. He's like, I don't think you should be here either. Because I was already like running a business and busy. And I'm like, I'm missing time right now to build boards, to be in this class, to wear a suit and tie, which I will never wear. And he's like, you should probably leave right now. I was like, okay, see you later. And that was the end of my college. And then like on the way home, I was like, the hell did I just do? I'm gonna have to tell my parents I just dropped out. Like, and both my parents were teachers, so it's like, wow. Gonna be a big deal. And my dad was basically like, he's like, that's fine, but he's like, you better go 100% and be really pushing. So from that point forward, I wasn't messing around. It was, nose to the grindstone, make the money during the summer, bank it up. Build stock during the winter because it's fairly seasonal. And then...
Really?
I mean, it's not as seasonal as you would think it was, actually, because wetsuit technologies come so far that it's not too bad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then we also...
Not too bad where you live. It'd be bad where I live.
It's not that much different during the winter, to be honest. Our water temp in the winter here is like 34. So it's pretty brisk. But the air is what really makes the big difference.
Yeah, I think our water temperature is below freezing because it's ice.
Right. You don't typically surf in a
Yeah, I
lake.
know.
Not very often.
I know.
There's some guys,
Just
we call them
joking.
freshies.
Really?
There's actually,
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
a good bit of surfing. I know in Montreal, on the rapids, there's a pretty big surfing scene there, and I think in Toronto as well. There's an area where some people surf.
Yeah. There were surf clubs like all in the I think they might be called the Great Lakes Surf Club. Like Wisconsin and Ohio has one, and I would see them. They'd all come down on a caravan and vacation down here by us because we would surf Hatteras a lot, so it's barrier islands, and I'd see them down there because they'd be camping the campgrounds and surfing, and all real pasty white guys. I'm like, you guys have got to be all together, and they're like, oh yeah, we're from Ohio. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense, because they got like neck tans from the wetsuit, and it's pretty funny, but. There's a surprising amount, and a lot of guys. So freshwater isn't as buoyant, so they would actually get their boards custom made a little bit thicker.
Interesting.
Because it's a little bit more difficult, and they have such short swell fetch. So because it's wind driven, so the swells are really stacked on each other. It's not ground swell. So the boards are just a lot different, a little bit more nose flip in the rocker, like the curvature of the board. Anyways, sidebar, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we're getting into the weeds on surfboards that I don't think beyond. Well, it's well beyond my understanding of what even you're using words I don't even understand. But I don't think you got to it. Okay, when you quit school, were you working 40-hour weeks? Were you working 80-hour weeks?
Yeah. Oh, way more. Yeah, I was working at a minimum 80-hour weeks. It just because at that point I had to
Right.
to prove that I was going to go for it, and my business grew tremendously in that amount of time. So I was working way more hours than I would have worked at any other job.
I'm curious, when you say prove, do you mean like prove to yourself or, make a living? What do you mean when you say prove?
So I was living in my parents' house. So
Okay.
I had to prove to my parents that this was going to be legit, that I wasn't just, trying to surf all day, which I mean,
Gotcha.
that's really what I wanted to do, but this was the closest thing I could get to that. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then the main thing I tried to do is I started trying to get accounts where they would sell my boards, out of the surf shops. And then I started picking them up for doing repairs, which repairs is where the real money's at in surfboards.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's very minimal material cost and low labor, really. And so you make a lot more money an hour doing that than you do building boards.
Yeah, it's true in every industry, right? It's like you only make the thing once, but all the infrastructure around the product is where all the real money is at. It's like when people say, like everyone's buying electric cars. Well, don't start an electric car company. Start a mechanic company that can repair the electric car. Or start the people that's gonna, that's a bad example, but another product. Develop the infrastructure around that product because I don't know. Yeah, money wise, it's where most of the money is.
It's like printer companies are not printer companies; they're ink companies that sell printers.
Yeah,
that's such an interesting thing because of how much of the repair industry has disappeared. And I wonder why that's happening. Is it because like people are trying to make things that can't be repaired so that you have to buy another one?
Well, I don't know the answer, except for I know the answer for surfboards is that, so these are like really expensive handmade boards, right? So like my average board was going for like $1,200. So you bring it in and it was only $50 to fix it. And it would last, like my average board, 10 or 12 years is what I was hoping to get out of it. And I've had some of them way longer than that. So, with boards, you can repair it and it'll last a really long time. So the repair industry, like we didn't have, we're not making injection molded parts that when they crack, that's it. Like it's just fiberglass and foam, so you can fix it.
So Austin, I'm curious, like in having your feet pretty firmly in the ground of like physical products, then what attracted you to the YouTube world and wanting to make videos?
So I I actually did YouTube videos when I built surfboards, and I had no idea what I was doing. My dad was filming and making the videos, and I was like, "What are you putting this on?" And he's like, "Oh, we're going to put it on YouTube." And I had no idea. Like, he was a tech teacher, so he kind of was in early with that kind of stuff. And um, so I think they're like 2008, 2009 is when I was putting my first videos on YouTube, something like that. So they look like they're filmed with a potato. It's terrible quality. But they were one of the first surfboard glassing. The weird thing about surfboards was that it's like the job security in the surfboard industry is that you don't know how to build them, right? So the older guys do not want to teach anybody because that's their job security. So I actually caught a lot of flack when I was putting them on YouTube because people were like, okay, now everybody's going to learn how to build surfboards. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's what I would have loved when I was 16 instead of me having to just figure it out, and waste a ton of money. And, like the first 100 boards were probably pretty rough, because I just didn't know what I was doing. And so I had done YouTube before. And then when I started doing the pins, I was like, you know what we need to do? We should do some cool builds, because when you're making product, it can get pretty not tedious, but just like monotonous. Where you're making the same, like especially like the pins that I make, I'm making like I'm doing 500 of one step, then I'm doing
Wow.
500 of another step, and we're just processing massive amounts of shells and stuff. And that is definitely not my normal style. Like I'm not made for that. So the whole time I'm like, it'd be really cool doing anything else besides this right now. And I told my wife, I was like, I want to do something different, like at least a couple days a week, like try to get, but I don't want to stop making. I want to make something unique or a project that I had an idea for. And and I told her that I wanted to actually slow down the business some because it was at an unsustainable level for how many people I had working for me at that time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have to slow this down. It's just too much. And I didn't want to hire a bunch more people. So I kind of stepped it back and retooled it so that I had enough time where a couple days a week, a couple of partial days a week, I could do YouTube. So, and the benefit to doing YouTube, I was like, oh, you know what would be really nice? This new tool. And then I could do that one, let's buy this $1,000 tool because I got this $10 project that I want to work on.
Yep.
And that's, that's how I was like able to like backdoor all these tools in with a purpose. So
in talking about investing in tools, I want to talk about that like on a serious note, on not this like I'm going to make a $10 thing and put it up on YouTube and not even be monetized for a year kind of joke. But you obviously had to invest in tools for your business, and from what I remember, there was like this part that you could buy, and you discovered that you could make it cheaper if you owned a metal lathe. I think that's how you got into getting a metal lathe. If I'm not, does this ring a bell? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's this little piece of brass and I use 2 of them in every single pin that I make. And to get them from the manufacturer, it was like 50 cents a piece, which doesn't sound like a lot until you're like, that's $1 a pin. If you're doing 10,000 pins a year, that's $10,000 that you're flushing down the toilet. So I found out that I was like, okay, you know what I can do? I can get a metal lathe. I'd already had multiple wood lathes. I was familiar with them. And I kind of wanted to get a metal lathe anyways. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to buy one and learn how to use it and make this part. And however many parts it'll take me to break even on this lathe, I had a tally going, right? So I wanted to get it to the point where that one little 50-cent part would pay for this lathe. And I was able to do it. I projected it would take me 2 years. I did it in like 6 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and
6
the lathe
months.
was like,
Wow.
yeah, the lathe was, it was like $6,500 because I bought a brand new one. And, so
Whoa.
yeah, so in 6 months I was able to do it. I was running a lot of parts off of it. And, yeah,
It's cool. I mean, it just kind of goes to show you that like you can't fully realize the benefits of any investment when you are thinking about buying it. Like it will likely, I mean, as long as you're like motivated and creative, it will likely yield things over and above what you initially think because you're creative, you're smart, and like you're motivated. And so those that domino effect of productivity just kind of happens, which is pretty cool. And it's a good reason not to like just write off the idea of investing in yourself.
right. And so then what happened, because I was just making that one part, and so when I bought the lathe, I could have made this part on like a Harbor Freight mini lathe, right? No problem. But I was like, let's go out buy a lathe that's way bigger, way more capable than what I need right now. Like, let's buy the bigger one so I can grow into it, is basically my thought. And because I think a lot of people fall into that trap where they end up buying like the smallest, like, let me just get in the door just a little bit. And then a year later, they're buying again. And then a year later after that, they're buying again. I'm like, if you would have just bought from the beginning, you guys would have been not out as much,
The buy once, cry once.
Right. Yeah, that's totally, I agree. And so, but what that did was it opened up my ability for doing metal pens instead of just doing, brass. Now I could do harder stuff like titanium and copper, brass, aluminum, steel, Damascus stuff. So now I had a way broader range of pens that I could make, and they were much more expensive pens than what I was making before. So that one piece of machinery opened up like a whole new world. We'll go Aladdin with it, and and it just to a market that I didn't know was there, right? So, and I think if you can see, like I bought the metal lathe new because I didn't know any better, and I was scared to buy a used one because I wasn't familiar with it. I didn't want to buy one that was going to need repairs, that kind of stuff. Which, looking back now with my experience and with how many lathes I bought since then, I would have saved a lot of money by buying a used lathe. But so auctions, things like that, that's the way to go to get the best bang for your buck.
That's an interesting point about like looking for the used tool. But I think with business, I don't think if you're going to buy something, don't be afraid to buy new. I think is something that if it's a business expense, it's okay to buy new, right? Like I think, like you said, in 6 months you had it paid off, right? Like I think when I think about other tools that I've bought over time, obviously as a hobbyist who even like has commissions that people asked me to do 6 months ago that I still haven't done. Not really. I don't want to talk too much about that, but I've got picture frames that are just sitting there waiting to be built, and it's like an afternoon's worth of work and a big paycheck at the end of it. I just think about it and go, if I were running a business, I would be doing things so much different and buying new tools instead of spending all my time researching on Kijiji for a South Bend. I think would probably be like the cost efficient way to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's as cut and dry as that. I think it does depend on the tool. Like, so for example, we're looking to buy a big laser cutter at Steam Project. We have a 24 by 12 inch Epilogue laser cutter right now, which was bought at a time when the laser was not such a core part of the business. But since COVID hit, so much of our business is around these kits that we manufacture and send out to kids, which have many laser cut parts. So this small Epilogue laser is running all the time. So we need a bigger one, and we need something that can make things faster. And the thing with lasers is they're very expensive, and a lot of times they're coming from out of the country. So you also have to think about import fees and customs and shipping, which can easily add a few $1,000s onto the already like 10 to 20 to, I mean, depending on what type of laser you're looking at, it could be like tens of thousands of dollars. And so I think with some of the equipment that's that expensive, it a lot of times can be really worth it to find that gem used item in your area, which like we might have found very recently, just because you can save so much time and just like thousands of dollars just with like a slight more bit of effort.
Yeah, I think part of the key too, when you're trying to, so like I will constantly, even now, even though I don't need any new tools, I still watch the market, right? I'm still watching Facebook Marketplace. I'm watching Craigslist. And even today, a lathe popped up, and I just like, I had that brief second. I have 7 lathes in my shop right now. And there was a brief moment where I was like, that's a good deal. I should go get that right now. Just because it's a good deal, and I'll flip tools like, eventually. And
well, I was going to say, I was like, are you thinking about flipping them if you were to buy them, or is it just because it's a good price?
Yeah, maybe, eventually I would do that. So what I've been doing, my technique is I buy shipping containers and fill them with the tools that I buy, fill the excess in there. And then I have sold some, but, but what I'm saying is I constantly keep feelers out, and I keep my radar up for deals. And so maybe I'm not looking for something, but maybe I'll find one that would be a better tool than what I have. And if it's going for something similar in price to what I have currently, why not upgrade for free? So that's kind of how I like my mills. I've been through several, and, I haven't paid hardly any money for them if you discount the original investment. It's basically been the same amount of money turning over and just getting better and better tools. So I think that's a good technique, especially in the beginning when you're strapped. Like when you just start out, it's a lot to, especially, we talked about this before, where like woodworking is not super expensive to get into, but machining is. There's a barrier to entry. So the used tools really will let you in a lot sooner.
Man, every time I see a machining video, like whether it be yours or like Jimmy DeResta or this old Tony, I just look at all the different cutting heads they're using, and I'm like, each one of those things must be like $100 easily. Just like, what is the minimum initial investment to get into milling?
Yeah, when people first start getting into machining, they're like, "Oh my god, this lathe is like $6,000," and I'm like, you have no idea what the expensive part is. Like the lathe is $6,000. Get ready, because it's going to be $6,000 to $8,000 worth of tooling to run that. To have everything. Now, obviously, you can do some projects, but I don't think there's an end to the machine tooling. Like I haven't found it, and I'm in pretty deep. Yeah. So I don't think there's an end to it.
Well, it's fun. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going to kind of throw out a theory here. Like, I think part of the factor that makes tools cost what they do is the market that exists around them. So like there's this huge hobbyist woodworking market, but I feel like machining is still traditionally centered around factories and tool and die makers and professionals. And so there's not the same sort of hobbyist machining. Do you think that's like a valid assessment?
No, actually I don't. I think that there's a lot of hobbyist machinists, and home shop machinist guys, whether either they're machinist at work and then they have a home shop, or they retire and they have a home shop. You'd be surprised how many there are, or just guys. There's a lot of guys that are like engineers that'll have a shop in their garage at home where they're making their own little projects and stuff. Which I think most of them are like 35 and up, like I think the younger kids are more into like kind of like 3D printing and lasers and stuff like that. I think a lot of those kids, if they were older, would have gotten into the machining.
That's interesting. Okay.
Right. It reminds me of like Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, when he talks about having a lathe to do maintenance on his motorcycle.
Yeah, he does.
Right. Like back in the day, apparently people just had this kind of stuff. But I think the big, for me looking at it, because I was looking at lathes today, because I don't know why. And I just looked at it and I saw the, like, a whole bunch of tooling was coming with this lathe that was in my area. And I just looked at it and went, I don't even know is that good tooling for what I want to do? It's probably not. It's like there's all these like things that I was looking at going, there is so much information that the barrier to entry for me getting into any kind of metal work has nothing to do with the expense, has everything to do with the knowledge like thing. And that's, I think, a lot to bring it back a little bit to business is the same thing for business. It's like taxes and like, I don't know, Google just emailed me today and said, what's your GST number, which is our like general sales tax number. I was like, I don't have one of those. Like, I'm not a real business. I just play one on YouTube, right? Like, it's all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's like any other thing you start, you learn the minimum you need at the beginning and then you like gradually pick it up. Like if you were to buy those lathe tools, I'm sure you would slowly start figuring out how to use it in the same way that you figured out how to do woodworking. I mean, you might have started a lot earlier in your life with woodworking, but like same thing with taxes. How do I do my taxes? Well, maybe the first step is like go on the government website and see what the resources are for small businesses. Like it's all doable.
Totally. I know it's all doable, but the barrier to entry between wood is like there's one blade and it cuts the wood. And with metalwork, there's like 700 different things and they all cut the wood slightly different or the metal slightly or wood, whatever. I don't know. Right. It's like,
I want Austin to weigh in. Austin, how do you think of that perception versus how you think of wood versus metal?
So really we only use like, carbide and high-speed steel for cutters typically, unless it's some kind of, crazy other EDM process or whatever. So in fact, you guys have seen me use the router bits to cut profiles in brass and things like that. So, and that's just carbide. Carbide's carbide. It's all about the angles that they're ground mainly is what's important. And then they sell different shaped carbide inserts depending on what kind of material you're going to use. But all that being said, in the home shop, almost everything can be done with high-speed steel, which is the same as what a wood lathe gouge is made from. The not the one with replaceable carbides, but the actual high-speed steel gouges. So it's the same stuff. It's just...
But it's more the profiles and everything. Like, correct. Every time I look at it, I just look at it and go, there's like... When I look at wood, I guess maybe it's because I haven't looked at enough routering stuff. But when I look at wood, there's a table saw and it's got a blade, and a circular saw, it's got a straight blade. My jigsaw, straight blade. Bandsaw, straight blade. Right? There's a lot of straight blades. And I feel like when I look at metalworking, everyone has this like kit out of random stuff that I just look at and go like, why? What is the meaning behind that? And then I look at it and go, the thing I don't understand is feet, speeds, and feet. And I'm sure there's a way of looking it up that makes it easy, but
right.
Because for wood, I go as fast as I can push it.
Yeah. Okay. So for brass and aluminum, as fast as you can push it, pretty much. And then, it's the same thing. Like you can cut brass and aluminum on a wood cutting bandsaw. That's because it's freaking screaming. It's going so fast. So, but you were saying that they're all straight blades, but are they? Look at your carbide teeth on your table saw blade. They're not straight. There's curved. There's like one straight one, then two different ways. They're all just shaped differently for performance, right? So it's the same thing for metalworking tools. It's just they look different from what you're used to seeing. So once you learn the basics, and then we use what's called the Machinist Bible. It's the machinery handbook, and it has like all your feet. It has. Everybody should buy one of these books, even if you're not a machinist, because it has so much load calculations and threading, and like it's kind of like the engineer's black book. It's kind of what it's like, but like on steroids, 1,000 pages or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, Grant, when you were saying, the router world in comparing that to machining, like I was thinking the same thing. Like that's what I think when I think of routers, and like the single router bit is like $20-$30. Then like if you want to do moldings and all these different profiles, like how much are you going to drop on just router bits alone? And, I do really think it's like that with every new craft. Like, you see from the outside all of the millions of tools and attachments you can use, but really once you start doing it, like, you can get away with very little. It was the same when I learned the laser cutter this year. It's like, when I would see like any laser cutting video, I was like, I've done 0 2D vector. I've done very little vector graphics design. Like, I know nothing about how lasers work. But then, you do that first project, and they were great at the Steam project with me. Like, they were basically like, find something on the internet that you think is cool, and then make a laserable file and cut it out. And then I found this like MC Escher tessellation, and just that one project, I was like, oh, okay, I can use this laser cutter to make legit stuff now. It was the same with the 3D printing. I would, like, people get super into rebuilding their 3D printers and adding all these modifications, but you really don't need to do any of that to make really cool stuff with 3D printing. And I would wager it's the same with machining. You use one cutter, it does something cool. You use another one, and I don't know.
For sure. And that's
Humans
what
are smart.
Saying. Yeah, the high-speed steel. So the way that for machining, they sell high-speed steel blanks, and they basically just have one angle ground on each side. It's like 30 degree or something. And then you actually just take it over to your grindstone and shape it, put your relief angles. And so you actually are making your own cutters. And once you kind of get the hang of it, it's not very difficult. And the high speeds, they're like $11 a piece. So you could grind a whole set for under $100. I mean, you're going to be riding the grinder for a long time, So, but, like Grant, you were saying there's a bunch of, like, the lathe for sale with a bunch of stuff. The bunch of stuff in the boxes is what's worth the money. It's not the machine. So, like, when I go to look at a thing and they're like, oh, yeah, all this tooling comes with it, I'm like, cool. And I'm looking at the tooling, and the guy's like, you're not going to check out the lathe? I'm like, that thing's worth pennies in comparison to what's in these boxes. Of course, I don't say that to him. But I'm like, all this comes with it, right?
Right.
So the South Bend 9-inch that I just
But that's what's the overwhelming.
Right. Well, when you got to do it, FaceTime.
Right. It's overwhelming.
FaceTime me, and I'll tell you what it's worth.
All right.
But so, like, you were talking about, entry level to business and making into business. If I was going to try to do from scratch what I'm doing now, one of the first things I would buy is a laser, because I think that is like an instant business in itself. In one tool, you can make money to start, and it's something that you could have in your house and make money. And that would be what we were talking about, where you pull the boat closer to the dock before you jump. That's an easy one to have. You can have it in an apartment. You're going to probably smoke out your neighbors a little bit.
I wouldn't have it here, with how close my window is to the next building.
You could at least do it until they call the cops. But it would be, what I'm saying is, like, it's a good entry point.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You can make finished projects right away.
Jets.
Yeah. I think it's Fast and Furious, actually.
Okay. Well, I think this has been great. I agree. A laser or a CNC are both those things that you could turn those into businesses, boom, because they're working for you.
Laser over CNC. I'm just going to throw that in.
Right. Depends on what you want to do. But that's up to you to decide. You do your own research. But what I want to talk about is when to get out of a business, because a lot of people get into a business and keep going with it, and then drive themselves to bankruptcy, or get it's the same with like any stocks or something. It's like you ride it till you've lost all your money. Then you go home with your penny stock and you're like, oh, I had $1 million at one point. Now I've got nothing, right? And I know you got out of a business, and I think that would be something really interesting to hear is what were the considerations you took when you were deciding to leave that business? And that'll be our wrap-up point to leave this episode of the podcast too.
Okay, so I transitioned from surfboards to pins, and the way it worked out, I had my first son during that time, so I was ready to get away from, because we were using polyester resin, which is there's a lot of bad stuff in it, and it's not good for you to be around, even though you're wearing protective gear and stuff. you're still getting it. You're getting exposure. There's no doubt about it. So after doing it for 16 years, I just wanted to get away from it. I knew it wasn't good for me to be around. And like, I didn't have a way out. I didn't have anything at that point. So I didn't have another job to go to, and I definitely wasn't going to work for somebody. I'd worked for myself since I was 16. That's a very difficult transition to go work for the man, So, right. So I started making the pins, and the pins really took off. And I was still building surfboards at that time, and it just so happened to work out that, like, kind of how school was getting in the way of me building surfboards, building surfboards was getting in the way of me making money selling pins. So I basically just kind of like phased one into the next one, with a little bit of overlap. And at that point I had a factory, I had a surf shop, a retail store, and I was like full commit. And this is probably not the best way to do it, but I just closed the doors and walked away and just set up my machine shop and just never mess with a surfboard again. So I'm sure there's a smarter way to do that. So, all my customers were like I had like thousands of ex-girlfriends calling me for like a year. That's what it felt like, because I'd been building boards for them for, over a decade from the same guys.
You could just send out one mass email.
I didn't. Oh man. At that point I was just like, I don't know. I was just so done.
No, and honestly, that sounds like the funnest way to do it. Like, that sounds like, yeah, I just want to do this thing, so I did it. But then you have to deal with those thousands of calls.
Yeah. So I ended up, I never answered emails. I didn't owe anybody anything or anything like that. I just shut it down, walked away. And I had this reporter that was like after me for forever, trying to get an interview. And finally, I ended up I waited like 8 or 9 months, and then I responded to him, and I was like, I will give you an hour if you'll leave me alone. Because he was just like trying to get my number from people, and nobody would give him my number and stuff. So then I gave him that, and I was like, okay, I need you to get this out to everybody that I'm not coming back. And then so whenever anybody tries to get me a build on board, here's the article that shows that I'm not doing it anymore. So. So I don't know. Maybe it was the right way because it got me press, right?
There you go, playing a long game.
Did you during that press talk about your pen business?
Yeah, that's what I made it about. He's like, let's talk about surfboards, Maul. Let's talk about pens.
That's perfect. So in reality, what it is how to get out of when you want to get out of business, you're doing it for your own reasons. Right?
Yeah, I don't.
You make the decision.
I don't. No. I mean, it's not your decision. If you bottom out your business, it's not your decision by that point. But yeah, if you're walking away at a point where you have a successful business rolling, it's definitely got to be your call, right? Or you owe like crazy back taxes or something like that would be the other reason that somebody would get shut down. But yeah, it's definitely it's got to be your decision. And I see a lot of people that have been working in the same business that they've owned forever, and you can just see like the light's not in their eyes anymore. They're basically punching the clock. I'm like, why don't you just go get a job? It'll be way easier than that. But at the same time, people could say that to me, and I'd be like, I'm not going to go work for somebody. I can't do that. I can't work in an office job. I don't know. We're just, everybody's different.
So when you at the end of the surfboarding, did you feel like you didn't have the passion you had when you were 16?
Oh man, I was done. Yeah.
Okay.
It was a long time, but what really kicked it off was having kids and not wanting to be around the chemicals, and bring that home. Cause I remember one day I shaped boards all day. I never went in the glassing room. Our factory was two levels. So and it was quite a distance down the way. So I shaped boards all day. I never went in the glassing room, and I came home and I was laying in bed at night and I started coughing, and my wife was like, oh my God, how many boards did you glass today? I can just smell it when I coughed. And I was like, I didn't glass any today. I wasn't even in the glassing room today. But just the smell had just gotten into my lungs. And when I coughed, she could just smell the resin. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to get out of this, And so that was the night that I was like, yeah, I'm done. That's it. And so like then for the next 3 weeks, it was like exit strategy.
Totally. Well, on that, I think we're going to have an exit strategy on this episode, and I'm going to move on to thanking our Patreon supporters. As you all know, we got a monthly pre-show hangout that we like to do. Everyone who joins on Patreon gets access to the pre-show, the after-show, as well as a custom leather keychain made by the one and only Morley Kurt. If you want to check that out, you can go to patreon.com/clamp. We really appreciate everyone who joins there, no matter if you're joining at the spring clamp level, the C clamp level, or the F clamp level. We love everyone who comes and supports us there. If you can't support us, we appreciate you just listening. But if you want to support a little more than listen, you can go and either write us a review, and then Morley will try and replicate your accent, which I'm really interested to hear later, the Louisiana/Texas accent that Morley has been working on all week for the review he's going to be reading soon. And if you don't want to write a review because you can't figure it out on Apple, because I know exactly how I feel. I go on Apple Podcasts and I don't know how to write a review. I don't know. Apple doesn't make any sense to me. I'm an Android person. So if you don't want to do that, you can just share it with a friend. Tell someone that you heard about Clamp and that you can never have enough of them. So we're going to move on to the Clampmendations of the week.
Clampmendations!
Something, I've been watching these videos from this guy. He's Canadian, from Montreal, actually. So from Morley's former city of living or habitating.
The city of brotherly love, as they call it.
Oh, really? It's Philadelphia? No.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys have seen this internet drama thing where the guy sings songs. His name is Lou Ballin, and he does these hilarious songs about internet drama that he finds, and he turns the internet drama into a song. It's hilarious. I'm sorry I swore. Take that out. Bleep that out, Adam. Come on. Anyways, go check them out. How about you, Morley? And we'll end on Austin.
Yeah. Before I say mine, I can't remember what the account is called, but there's this fantastic TikTok account. He's probably on other social medias as well. And he does drum beats to like TV show clips. Have you ever seen those? Just like random video clips. He'll make a drum beat to like people talking, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's just along that same vein. So yeah, this week I wanted to shout out a really cool artist. His name, I don't really know how to pronounce this because there are some accents, but I will say Jiri Pros. So I actually had seen his account before, and I follow his company account, which is called Fluor Lab. It was recommended to me in response to the geodesic dome planter that I made. And he does these really cool like bent wire and brazing stuff. His company Fluor Lab, or what is it? No, Fluor. Yeah, Fluor Lab. They are essentially these like really delicate flowers made out of like acrylic and bent wire and LEDs, and they open up when you wave your hand over them. But the rest of his account like is just like very interesting geometric shapes with like brazing and soldering and electronics. I think he uses some 3D templates as well. And it's a medium that I definitely want to explore further. So just like scrolling through his account is very inspirational. And he also has a Prusa, so he's a kindred spirit in that sense. So yeah, Jiri Pros. It's JIRIPRAUS. We'll link him in the show notes.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I saw that the metal wire bender jig that you made. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And, shout out to you for your triangle bending jig, which informed it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I was going to go with Dave Ramsey. It's going to be my shout out or my Clampmendation. So especially I was thinking about what's a good shout out for people that are trying to start a business, right? And one great thing to do is to not have any debt when you're going to try to start a business, because you're just starting yourself out on the wrong foot for sure. And I've used his baby step program to get rid of all of our debt. So we live without debt. So I buy all tools, anything with cash. So if anybody's thinking about it, it's really freeing. I think it's called like Financial Peace is his big program that he does. There's a lot of religious stuff, not my bag. Just nix that part if you're not into it and just listen to the financials. And, take what you like, leave what you don't. And I think it's really helpful for some people. So that's my Clampmendation.
Nice. The other I'm just going to add this on top in terms of paying for things straight up, is that you're helping businesses, because credit card companies charge businesses more. And so all those rewards you're getting come right out of the pockets of the business owners. The higher reward credit cards cost companies more. So if you pay for things with debit, you're helping businesses.
And I agree with doing that for the small businesses, and then paying for the everything with credit card for the bigger businesses, because they've built that into their price.
Fair.
And I'm just sticking to the man. So I agree. I also live a debt-free life. The only thing I have is a mortgage, so I'm totally with you on that. But it's probably also why I've never really started a business, because I just look at the money that would need to go into that and I go, I don't have it, so I'm not going to do it. I've always lived on if I don't have the money to buy it and I'm not willing to wait for it, I probably don't need it.
Have you seen that SNL skit, Don't Buy Stuff You Don't Need?
No.
Oh, that's a classic. I'll link that in the show notes.
Nice.
Or no, it's Don't Buy Stuff You Can't Afford. It's like, we have the new best money management book. It's called Don't Buy Stuff You Can't Afford. It's one page long. That's great. It's classic.
That sounds great. Well, now it's time.
It is.
It's time to hear Morley do his best accents.
All right. I was a bit blindsided by this, because nowhere in the review does it say it's from Louisiana or Texas. But I trust Grant, so I guess I'll just wing it. All right. Shop time with friends. I like the format of this show and the way the hosts interact. Reminds me of days sitting around the ice chest in the shop talking with my friends. Their topics cover not only physical making, but also the creative and living aspects. It has a good flow, and I'm often surprised how quick they make the episode feel. From Dean LSU. Oh, I guess LSU, Louisiana State University. That makes sense.
So you're all starting. It's all coming together now.
5-star review from Dean LSU. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. And one thing I thought about that when I was reading this review, I thought it'd be a really good review to have on this one, because I think Austin might know who this Dean guy is.
Yep, that's for sure. You didn't sound like him. More like
Is it Dean Duplantis?
Yeah,
yes, it's Dean.
Okay, well, if Grant had said Texas, anyways, sorry, Dean. I know that's not how you talk.
Dean doesn't sound like a typical Louisiana accent, though. Like the Brandy, the welder. She's got like the legit. But I think they're like he grew up like 10 miles from her, so it's crazy the difference in tone that their accent is.
Yeah. Once he starts drinking more, Dean definitely has a little bit more. But why do you know Dean? Let's try and get let's get your selling in here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm on a podcast with Dean Duplantis and Christy from Twisted Twine Woodworking. It's called Making Our Way, and we release Tuesdays. It's a podcast about making stuff.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, on that, I want to thank TF Turning for the use of our theme song. If you want to hear that, you can listen to the after show where Morley likes to sing it a cappella. The other thing I wanted to mention is that next week we will be doing a live recording. And by next week, I mean it's going to be like 2 days after this episode drops. We're going to be doing a live recording Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I'm not going to do any math. That's just the time. You look it up. You put in the time zone, and you put in your time zone, and you figure out when it is. 9 p.m. Eastern time, Wednesday, April 28th. And yeah, we're going to be doing a live. It'll be up on our YouTube. So make sure you pop on by over to our YouTube channel and subscribe there. We're trying to hit 100 subscribers so that we can claim our custom URL. We're hoping that if we can do it, we'll get Clamp. We're not going to get Clamp because someone's probably already taken it. So we're hoping for Clampcast. The sooner we get there, the less chance that someone steals it from us. So head on over to YouTube and check that out, and then join us for a live episode. And as before we go, I want to know, Austin, where can everyone find you and where to buy your awesome pens?
So my website is highcalibercraftsman.com. That's for all the pens. And then you can pretty much find me on every social media under High Caliber Craftsman. My making account is High Caliber Craftsman Builds on Instagram.
Right, just to confuse people.
Well, you know. I like to have it split.
Yeah. You like to have a split. I understand. Well, you can find us collectively everywhere on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Do we have a TikTok, Morley? Did you ever start that TikTok for us?
No, I haven't.
No.
We could try to do the Planet Money TikTok thing and just do like full on produced skits over and above our podcast, but I don't know if I'm willing to put in that work.
So not on TikTok, but everywhere else. Search for Clamp. If that doesn't come up, Clampcast or Clamp, Morley, Adam, Grant. That combination of stuff will get you to us. And yeah. Until next time.
See you.
You can never have too many clamps. So don't forget to share this with a friend.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye. Hello and welcome to Clamp, the Creating, Living, and Making podcast. I'm your host, Grant Alexander, and joining me today is Morley Kurt.
Yo.
And we have a special guest, Austin from High Caliber Customs.
Ooh.
Craftsman.
Ooh, Craftsman. Okay, we'll just start that one again. I had like this brain fart. I was like, High Caliber, fuck. All right.
Adam is totally going to put that in at the end.
Yeah, he is. I was like, I know he has two different Instagrams, and one of them like has builds in it. And it's like, is it custom builds? Anyways, High Caliber Craftsman. He's a craftsman that's very high caliber, and there's things. Anyways, okay. So,
sorry. Go.
Welcome back.
All right. So 3, 2,